Hey, Chinwaggers, it's Stephen Asma, and today we're giving thanks to one of our favorite wags, the great Tom Hanks. Whether you're heading to loved ones or you're gearing up for an awkward dinner, then you know you're going to have some awkward Thanksgiving dinners. Enjoy this encore and have a very happy Hanksgiving. Do you see what I did there? Hanksgiving? Yeah, okay.
Hello, Mr. Hanks. Thank you so much.
Delighted,
it really is a pleasure.
Delighted. Well,
and as I say, you didn't formally meet my colleague Steve Asma, who is a philosophy professor out in Chicago.
Now, what's your story? How did you guys come to into each other's sphere of influence?
It was during the lockdown period.
COVID. We met online.
And I happened to see
on a dating site.
On a dating site. I happened to.
I'm glad my lawyer is on.
Yeah, I know. Listen, it only gets worse. I saw Steve give a lecture, a talk. He wasn't lecturing at anybody. He was talking about creativity and the imagination and consciousness thing. And I thought, this guy seems really cool. So I contacted him afterwards, and we hit it off and found we had a lot of interests, which include sort of more kind of esoteric, oddball things like UFOs or
paranormal,
Sasquatch and things like that, or the paranormal, psi phenomena.
You are currently in a great wheelhouse, because I have just finished reading a book by Simon Winchester. I'm going to guess that you come across him. It's called.
Sure.
It is about knowledge. It's about how we know what we know and how we store this knowledge. Absolutely fascinating. Yeah. And now I am rereading for the second time Yuval Harari's *Sapiens*, which I read when it first came out.
Have you read that, Steve?
Yeah,
the Sapiens
he's really good on sort of the evolution of the mind, like human culture, and how, like Tom said, how we store knowledge in the sort of repository of culture. And it's in books and movies, but obviously in computation, and then sort of where's it all going? What's the future of the species? He's quite a global thinker.
I got this thing. Look, I only read this just so I can always top somebody at a dinner table conversation.
Nice, good.
Well, here's something I know. Here's something I read. Have you read anything? Harari speaks of the three great revolutions of all of humankind. The first one was the cognitive revolution, in which Homo sapiens were able to imagine things that were not there, including cooperation. Fascinating. And that goes back hundreds and hundreds of thousands of years. Then the next revolution was the agricultural revolution, in which Homo sapiens figured out, hey, if you plant this seed right here, it's going to grow. And so we don't have to move around so much anymore.
We can stay here.
Yeah. And then the final one, which we are in the midst of right now, the scientific revolution, that really just came up just in a blip of recently. Yeah. Essentially, it's when somebody invented a faster way to move around than a horse.
I remember my son being interested in sort of military stuff when he was a kid, and he wanted me to get him a book about sort of the development of like weapons and guns and stuff like that. And I got this book about ballistics written by some guy somewhere. And he talked about this, which was so interesting to me, was actually the concept of speed being really important and getting something from one place to another place faster. And that we're in a place now where physically we're able to get places pretty fast. So information speed is becoming the sort of really prized thing now. And I often think that that's one of the real problems we're suffering now, is the speed of information, that it's like, too much information now coming at you too fast is my thing. But the speed thing is really interesting.
Also, in addition to the speed, it was 6 months ago when I said to my students, and these are college students, I said, what should we do about ChatGPT in this class? And they were like, well, I never heard of that. That was 6 months ago. And now everyone is using it to write their essays and get around the assignments. And I'm like, oh my God, very quickly people will be able to avoid learning all the stuff they came there and paid their tuition money to learn. So that's troubling to me as well. Not just the speed, but also you don't even have to learn logic or writing or legal writing. You just plug it into ChatGPT.
there's a piece that I just read about the cognitive dissonance that is going to be present in AI. Is that it's going to do incredibly great things. And it's going to do incredibly malevolent things all at the same time.
I keep trying to see what the great things are going to be. I keep having a hard time seeing the good part of it.
Do you Waze? Do you use Waze in order to drive around and beat the traffic?
I do, but is that ultimately a good? But is it ultimately a good thing? Because if that thing goes down, and this has happened to me, I was driving in a place I knew kind of where I was, and I was following Waze, which was taking me a route.
Wait, I don't know what Waze
gone this
is.
way before. It's a
Where do you live,
positioning
Stephen?
system.
It's Chicago.
I know, Steve. Steve.
What the hell's Waze?
WAYZ, it tells you turn left here, turn right there. It affects the driver, but it also affects the neighborhood that the AI drives you through. Because people used to live in great neighborhoods where the kids could play with their bikes and the cars, but now people are trying to beat the traffic, and it's altered neighborhoods.
The gimmick with Waze is that it will show you, it will be like, okay, I'm going to take you an alternate way that'll get you there faster. And as you're saying, it'll take you through somebody's like nice, quiet neighborhood. Now,
I don't use it.
But if it goes... I don't try to, nice. I try not to use it very much because if it goes down, I'm screwed. And I was in a place that I knew where I was and I was lost because I'd been depending on this thing.
All right. So let's take this back a little bit farther. I don't know anybody's phone number anymore.
Right.
Yeah, right.
No.
Because it's stored on my phone.
Even family members.
Totally.
Yeah.
I can tell you that when I was 8 years old, I lived area code. My number was 522-2230. That was my number when I was 8.
387-4356. I still
tell
remember
you what my number is now. Can't do it.
Nope. No, me neither. I remember friends of mine's phone numbers from when I was 8 years old. I remember not just my own. I remember all kinds.
This is one of the things that Yuval Harari talks about too. Is we have this extended mind where you offload stuff that used to be in your head onto the devices, and then your memory is totally compromised because you can just go to the device and be like, okay, that's the phone. So our memory is shit. In the Middle Ages, people could memorize like the works of Aristotle and hold it in their heads. It's fucking crazy.
And people would train themselves to do shit like that too, right?
They had jobs doing that. I can recite Homer's Odyssey. Oh, I want you to come to my party, and I'm gonna give you a free meal and a goat. Now, the thing about
listen, that'll get me to a party now. Still, by the way, Tom Hanks, if you want me to come to your house ever,
just offer a goat.
We're embracing the barter economy here. That's coming down. The idea that AI will allow us not just to be the smartest we've ever been, but we can be as smart as anybody has ever been because we will know everything that anybody has known. This is an evolutionary place that we're just going to have to take some time and
adapt to. No, we're going to have to adapt to it. And the other side of it, obviously, hopefully, will be something okay. But right now, it just seems like crazy mayhem.
But I think we're just going to know more and more information. And people think information is knowledge, but it's not. It's really just data points. You still need to live a life, and in order to get the wisdom. In order to use that information, you can just pile up. One student was saying, why bother reading Shakespeare when you can just read the summary of the plot, on Wikipedia? Mm-hmm. And I was like, but it's in the language where all the good stuff is happening.
Sure.
It's Fair Thoughts and Happy Hours. Attend these, Stephen.
Right. Can I ask? I know that you did Falstaff a few years ago.
A little while ago. Yeah, can't remember a word of it.
Not a word of it, right?
We have heard the chimes at midnight. That's about us.
Okay, that's good. That's good. Did you do the whole? Was it that thing where you kind of cut all of it together?
It was a fabulous amalgamation. Dan Sullivan put it together. It was a bit of Henry Ford Part 1, bit of Henry Ford Part 2. And great cast. We did it outdoors. The problem is that we only had a month to rehearse and we only had a month to play it. I could have used a couple more weeks there. Let me tell you something. You'll appreciate this, Paul, Stephen, and you'll understand the human mind that goes out of it. There's one of the greatest pieces of prose, by the way, is Falstaff speaks in prose. Not the iambic pentameter, and that alone tells you something about the man and what Shakespeare meant about it. But there's that incredibly great speech about the properties of sack. meaning wine. Orson Welles used to perform it on like the Merv Griffin show all the
That's
time.
right. How amazing is that?
That's
First of all, that he would do that shit. He would show up on things like Mike Douglas and do that.
Oh, this overweening child that knows not the properties of sack, and that's not an accurate thing. So I'm out there because we only had a month to do it. I had a guy, a really great guy, was always supervising the text for me. So I would, at the end of every show, he'd say a little sloppy here, dead solid here, but come back. So I'm out on stage doing the properties of sack speech. And now I got to say, more often than not, I felt as though I'd crushed it. I think, nobody loved it. Nobody booed, but I'm out there and it's going along so great. And we try to learn the dialogue so we don't have to think about knowing the dialogue anymore, right? You just want to get it so that
it's just coming out.
So it just rolls out like the lyrics of your favorite Bruce Springsteen song. And I'm out there and there was some slight turn of phrase that led me into my audition speech that I used to audition with in 1977, 78 from Iago, in which I said, next thing I know, I'm out. And by the way, I did this audition speech 800 billion times.
Sure,
sir, continue. I follow him to serve my turn upon. We cannot all be masters, nor all masters cannot be fully followed.
Still in there.
Totally in there.
Still in there.
Behold, I'm out there thinking I'm doing pretty good. And I realize I have just said 4 couplets from my audition speeches.
The wrong fucking.
And I'm out there and, that moment of fabulous panic swept me. And I'm the only one out on stage. So I'm it's solo thing. So no one is there to look at me and say, Hanks, what's your So anyway, I got back into it, realized what was going, was able to get back into the Orson Welles version of Sir John Falstaff. Stumbled off stage. I went back to change my costume, and the guy who was looking after me looked up from his script and just said, "What the was that?"
Fuck.
Pardon my use of that.
Please.
I don't know.
No,
I don't know.
That's incredible. That's so. But I would counter that you were definitely in it, man, because your mind was so free and open.
And by the way,
you just went somewhere.
He wasn't really saying it wasn't that different kind of stuff. He was talking about human character.
It's related,
and, how to live versus how not to live.
The audience probably didn't notice it at all.
Here's the other thing: is that the audience had no idea.
Yeah.
No idea.
And that happens all the time.
You'll have a bad night and people will be like, "Oh my God, you were on fire." And you're like, "Really? I was thinking about the burrito I had for lunch."
Sometimes it's good to be thinking about the burrito you had out there, because otherwise you're hitting it a little too hard, trying to be a little bit too specific.
Yes.
Maybe it's because it just comes off with a slight difference, so there is a moment of originality out there. So,
right.
The worst thing in the world, I think, is to feel like you're doing out there by rote. I was in a play on Broadway called Lucky Guy, and I was on stage with a great actor by the name of Peter Garrity. I don't know if you know Peter.
I know he is.
He's a great guy. And we had a scene at the end of the first act that we had done probably 140 times. No, and that's just performing it, never mind rehearsing it. He'd always do it a little bit different just because that's the way, because he can, he's just that kind of guy.
Yeah.
And I was out there listening to him one night, and suddenly he said it in a way that I thought, that's what this scene is about?
That's awesome.
That's what we're talking about now. I have been doing this wrong the entire time.
That's amazing.
And that's when I think that's when you're into the buddy guy aspect of it.
That's where you're in the flow.
Yeah.
There's only so many frets and you only have so many words out there, but man, you can spin those things in ways.
But do some of these skills that you guys have as actors, do they translate to you as a writer? Because we've been loving your book. Are there acting skills that you think translate to writing?
Question.
I will say this. Yes, because it starts on the opposite end of it. Now, Paul, back me up on this. Mm-hmm. I think actors do a ton of writing on their characters that no one ever sees, no one ever reads, no one ever is aware of. because our job, I think, is to show up with ideas that are not on the page. We have to come in with all of our mojo, all of our why did we walk into the room? Our characters, why are we in this scene? Well, I think
why are we here?
Why are we here? And we do that writing prior so that no one has to tell us what we're doing or why. You know, even if it comes down to get up and look out the window. I don't ever need to be told why I have to get up and look out the window. I say, I know exactly why I'm getting up.
I got it. Yeah, I can make that. I understand why I do that. Yeah, this guy would do. Yeah, okay, yeah.
Don't worry about it. Now, the way that translates sometimes when directors or somebody else you're working with, you say, so what do you think the scene is about? I always say, I know what it's about. I want to win. That's what this scene is about. I want to win.
Sure.
That's what it is. So you take that. And then you would, Paul, have you done any writing? Have you like?
I want to. I do sometimes to sort of amuse myself, but I have the focus. I have the focus powers of a fucking gnat.
You would make a good writer, though, dude. You should.
I would like to try someday.
Just do it 25 minutes at a shot. You can get
That's what I have to do. I know.
When all of the writing that I've done, it comes from the same perspective of. I write it and then I look at it, say, that ain't quite it. And then I rewrite it and I say, that ain't quite it. And I keep going. I say, well, maybe I can balance that out with the next paragraph. Hey, I almost did. Let me go. That's
interesting.
That's what it all is. And, you know, like if you come to a movie, you'll see Paul, and I've seen Paul do this.
Oh, God.
And he's probably seen me do it. And you're just over in a corner mumbling to yourself.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, you're sort of, yeah.
All it is just so because, man, that ain't it. That ain't it. This is it. This
ain't it.
But
the interesting thing with a movie is you can do what you just said. If you feel like you missed something in one part, do you sometimes feel like you can make up for it in another part when you're making a movie?
You know what? Absolutely, because it's so. How was that, Tom? I said, I don't know. I didn't see it. You saw it.
Yeah, I'm not the guy. Yeah, that's your job, pal.
I have no idea. Like when I go back now. Even as far as going back to something like Peter Scolari, God bless him, I lost. He was in Lucky Guy. We lost him just about a year ago.
He was awesome.
I go back to see like clips of the show we did in 1980. A half-hour sitcom. I look at that and I remember Peter's lines.
Wow.
Scenes with just me and him in it. I say, oh, Peter says this great thing. Right?
Oh, amazing.
Look what he does. I don't remember my lines. I don't remember anything.
Fascinating. That's fascinating.
You know why? It's because I saw Peter do it. You know, I was watching him right there when he did it. And it's like that thing, whether he's good or bad, I thought he was always just killer. It was.
I think, though, Tom Hanks, that's not typical of actors. That he imprinted he imprinted on you so profoundly. And having worked with you, I know, and from watching, you know, that you're not a guy who's thinking about yourself all the time.
And yet I am.
Well,
because,
yes, you are. Part of you has to.
Because at some point, it cannot matter what anybody else does. I mean, you play ball without a doubt. It's playing center field in baseball. You got to move forward, back, to the left. You got to run in to get it. You got to lope over to get it. You have no idea what's going to come at you. All you know is, all you really think of is, please don't hit it to me. I'd much rather just back up a play at second base. Please don't put me.
It's true. You actually say something in this wonderful book of yours, which is called The Making of Another Major Motion Picture Masterpiece. You have a great line that says, one of the best things an actor can hear is, we don't need you. We don't need you today. Well, actually, we don't need you today. And even better is when you're at work and they come and they go, you know what, you're apt. We don't. And I'm like, oh my God.
Fantastic.
And it feels like you feel like you did when you were a little kid. And you could like go out and play in the street until like it was summer, and you could play in the street until 9 o'clock at night. You're just like, this is great.
I heard this great story about Gary Cooper. Two stories. One is Lloyd Bridges, who I worked with in a movie a million
Really?
years ago. Lloyd Bridges is in High Noon.
Oh,
Okay,
that's true.
Lloyd Bridges is in High Noon. Now he had a slightly bigger
That's
part,
true.
so they cut it down. But you watch High Noon. There's Lloyd Bridges in it. By the way,
right.
at the height of the Red Scare, which was not an easy thing to do. But I had read this. I had read this thing about what he said. He said it was impossible to work with Gary Coop, because you couldn't overact him and you couldn't underact him. Yeah, so because if you overacted him, you looked like you were,
You're like a fool.
doing a pantomime, and there was no way to underact the guy.
Underacting him.
He
No,
could cut all of
totally.
his lines down to the word yuck, and that communicated everything. So that was one part of it. So I always pictured like Lloyd Bridges and a bunch of guys talking about what do you look for in a script? What do you look for in a part? What do you look for in a movie? Well, I'm there all talking this, that. Well, I work for a moment to steal the scene. I look for a moment when, you have the line that I look for a great interest. I look for a love interest. And so we said, what do you look for in a screen, Mr. Cooper? He said, days off.
I gotta tell you, it's kind of true. I mean, it's kind of true.
Have you not shown up at work at 4:45 in the morning, right? Ready to do it. And the AD is out there and say, excuse me, Mr. Giovanni, please call me Paul. Paul, there's been a switch around, so I don't think we're going to get to you before lunch.
And you're like, sweet.
You're just like, nothing could be sweeter. It's like, I'm just going to settle in and just relax.
Your whole book sort of like reveals this like sort of like a iceberg in a way. Like we see, schlubs like me see the star, and then they see the movie, and they don't know what's happening in this sort of underwater iceberg of the movie making. And like you're showing that in your novel.
An iceberg is a good analogy.
That's a very good analogy.
And you guys get like sainted, but you also get demonized if the movie isn't a hit. And
that's true.
So you sort of get some privileges from it, but also you take the fall if the whole film doesn't go well.
I suppose so. I mean, it depends.
Well, I blame
the problems.
This is how I do it.
You blame me?
This is my philosophy.
It was nice to read like a Hollywood book that wasn't just like, God, it's a cesspool of vice and infamy, and everybody's just horrible. I mean, you acknowledge it, but it's actually about working on it, and you get the whole scope of a movie in there from pre-production, and you have people having to find an old light bulb factory in order to set up, whatever you need to set up in there to shoot in. And it's true. And you go to these little towns and you go to these bizarre little places. I love how much you have about food in the thing. Much everything revolves around food constantly. You're always talking about food, and everybody's always worried about food and coffee and food. And it's funny how it's the whole thing is food, basically.
You look at one of the things I realized that, the guys the Grip Electric, major department, right? These are the guys, men and women, who do heavy labor all day long.
Yes.
And you know what? As they get older, their knees go out. Yeah. They have problems with their backs, and they end up getting other kinds of jobs that go along with it. And there's a caloric intake that is necessary in order to do that work.
Absolutely.
I mean, how often have you been out on a set and it is friggin' hot? It is miserable in many ways. Or cold. One of the climate is brutal. The setting is brutal. Just getting from the base camp to where you're shooting is brutal.
It's crazy.
And you want to complain because you're wearing a kooky costume that may not match the temperature of the day. This is something that happens
perhaps,
all the time.
A little uncomfortable.
But you know what? They set up a little warming tent for us, and there's a little heater in there, and everybody else is essentially exposed to the elements
all day long.
In that case,
it's crazy.
You got to have some good food available, breakfast, lunch, and for the evening, and that food's got to be coming out all the time.
Yes.
Wow.
You got to eat. You got to drink.
It's a people don't realize it's a funny place. It's this artistic environment that's also it's a work site. It's a genuine work site, and just go with me on this because one of my favorite things on any movie I do is the dolly grip guys, the camera dolly guy. Which is a job, Steve. It's the guy who has to move. There's the camera, And there's the camera operator. It's an extraordinary job. There's the whole camera team of the guys who are checking that. It's not film anymore, but the guys who used to load film or check the camera. There's the focus puller, which is an amazing job. Amazing job. Guy has to keep it in focus as I'm moving my head too much and doing it. You got to keep it in focus. But there's the guy who has to move the camera. The camera's on a big trolley thing. It's on this cart. And he has to push it around. He has to raise it if it has to rise.
It's got a little knob.
And stuff
it's got
like
a
that.
little knob. So
He's got to raise it.
pushing and raising. Yeah.
So this guy has to move this huge thing around. He's bending over all the time. He's pushing this fucking thing around like this. But not only does he have to do that, if you're giving some moving speech and it has to move in on you at the right speed and stop at the right point, he has to do that. He's doing that. So it's this guy who's keyed into your performance as well as being a dude who has to move this goddamn big thing around. And I always think to myself,
very sensitive.
who are these guys?
Yeah.
It's a really particular skill set. So you get these strong dudes who are really sensitive to what's going on.
That's cool.
It's an amazing thing. Don't you love those guys?
Amongst us, if someone would come to say, "Oh my gosh, that shot where you came out and you just got bigger and bigger in the frame, and we could see it all in your eyes. How'd you do that?" And what you want to do is say, "Well, a guy named Mongo, the dolly grip
master,
he put this thing down
He
so
moved it
specifically, and if it
Yeah.
wasn't for Mongo, we would not have had that
That
shot.
shot wouldn't have worked. I just stood there. and
This is
kinda
one
like-
of the reasons that, honestly, I mean, I wasn't trying to alter the world. I was just trying to tell an interesting story in a new way. But when I was talking to my crack publishing team, and they said, "Would you like to write a novel?" And I said, "Sure."
Yeah, you bet.
You bet. You know what else I'd like to do? Brain chemistry. I'd like to get into. I'd like to do that too. I'd like to.
nuclear fission.
And I said,
Yeah,
but and then
totally.
they said, they say, you know, you have an interesting day job that people would write about. I said, there's no way. No, I'm not interested in doing that. Oh, but then I thought, but wait, I would like to write about the people that I have worked with.
Yeah.
All
We
you
don't
know,
see that. People like me don't see
no,
that. Yeah.
You don't. The specificity of what people have gone through to be, Paul, honestly, the best in their business.
Yes.
The guy
absolutely.
who hooks up the generator truck is
Totally.
the best in his business. you
The
know?
best. The guy, the video assist guy who can play I mean, whatever
A
it is.
Teamster
It's like,
coordinator, you know, that
no,
guy.
and I'm always sitting there going, my skill set is like ridiculous. I can do a funny fart. I can do that's funny. You know what I mean? It's like, but this skill set these people have is extraordinary.
Paul,
That's
as
interesting.
I'll read the thing that we did together, John Adams. No, I say did together. I stopped by for a day and a half and said, "Hey, how's it
He
going?"
came by. He was, I would find him over a craft service having a, or having a.
Hey man, hey, where are they putting you up, Paul?
Talk about inappropriate costuming in the wrong.
Yeah,
way.
that was it. Good high button shoes, man. I really.
Yeah. Oh, more leather, please.
You're
It's
actually
100
making a
It's
tri-corner.
113 out. I need more leather. I need a heavier wig.
There is
But yes.
you had a line in there, I believe, where you talked about the difference between having a choice of governance for the first time as opposed to king or the climate. There was a thing in there. Do you recall that?
He vaguely.
It said, we would, and in that line, you said
Yes.
for all of history, no one has had. They've had the same choice in who
yes.
their leaders was as they had in climate.
As they do in what the climate is. That's right.
Yes, the
Yes,
sun is
that's right.
hot. Guess
Yes.
what? You're hot.
Yeah.
It's
Yes.
cold.
Yeah.
Guess
Too
what?
bad.
Humid. You're
Yeah.
humid. You don't have any choice in it.
This is your king. This is your guy.
That, you're going back to 2001: A Space Odyssey, the dawn of man. You're going back into a really friggin' deep kind of like mode that was focused around, what happened at Independence Hall in 1775 or what have you. And then along with that, I think just comes all of some degree of like human suffering. And in the book, and I'll say the name just Because we're on a podcast, for God's sake.
I said it, but say it again. Say it again.
There is there's that grab bag of serendipity that I've gone to. You know, I've just never said I'm going to go back to everything I've ever read, everything I've ever been moved by, and I'm going to try to bring it into this scene, into this moment. And it doesn't matter where it comes from, as long as it reflects human behavior.
We read this great short story by you about time travel too, and it's why it's a great fantasy for film and for literature is because, like you said, you're born in a climate. If it's a hot climate, you're going to live there. You know, if you're born in a monarchy, you're going to live under it. But with time travel fantasies, you can pull yourself out of the determinism of your condition. And you can be like, what would it be like if I lived in ancient Rome, or if I lived way in the future? And I'm sort of wondering, like, where would you go if you could time travel? Here I'm just sort of impinging
It's in that story. It's called Because the Past is Important to Us. And I would go back. Right. I would go back to 1939. But
that's where you would go.
Yeah. And here's why.
Well, explain where the guy goes in the story, please.
It's a story about a company that starts offering time travel vacations. You know, it's called Chronometric Adventures, but you can only go to very specific places. Because half of the thing you got to explain in a time travel thing is the logic of time travel. Yeah.
Right.
You can only ride a certain part of the echo. The bounce only lasts so long. And lo and behold, in the time-space continuum, as this echo passes through us, you have to be in a very specific place to jump onto the echo, and you have to jump off the echo at the same exact space.
Yeah.
And so that's why you got to be in room 114 in a certain hotel in New York City that never, anyway, blah, blah, blah. And you can only go back to a day in 1939, and you only have 22 hours to spend there. So what are you going to do in 1939? You're going to go to the World's Fair. You go to the World's Fair because you know exactly where it is. Because if you were to go back to ancient Rome, you would not speak the language, you see. And that's the thing about time travel movies. They go back a long time. And guess what? Suddenly everybody speaking colloquial English, you know?
You're screwed. Yeah.
You wouldn't understand it. And
you're also probably going to catch some disease immediately. That's going to, like, you know, God knows, you're going to pass out from the smell probably.
You might be taller than everybody else there, and they're not going to like that. They're
weirdly taller.
Not going to have it, not going to have any money. But I would go back to that period, because as the lay historian that I am, it's like that period of time between the wars, between World War I and World War II, are the crucible for all of the history that we have been living ever since. The rise of that brand of fascism, and along with it, the communism that came after, particularly World War II, and imperialism because of it, that was essentially geographically based, that we had to have geography in order to control the world. You had to have land. You had to have the produce that came out of that land. You had to control the populace that lived there. When that war was over and the concept of trade and alliances came back into it, that meant geography was no longer the harbinger of wealth and power and the ability in order to defend one. Anyway, that's part of that is my perhaps philosophy. But 1939, that World's Fair was meant to be 100% altruistic, that essentially just said, look how great things are going to be. And there isn't a soul on earth who, after a couple of years of the formation of the United Nations, could honestly say, oh, just how wonderful things are going to be. The World's Fair had TV. Are you ready for this? The World's Fair had FDR opening it, I think in April or somewhere of 1939, and it was broadcast on television.
On television.
Wow.
And what was called television at this point? Was it called television at this point?
And chances are there were probably maybe 20 receivers and you had to go to an office in order to watch it. But this was 1939. Totally. Now, if the war hadn't come along, imagine how quick television would have been. And you could go to the World's Fair and stand at a microphone and be on camera. And in another room, your family could watch you in real time on TV. Cool. And it was living radio. Along with that, along with how great steamships were going to be and the promise of the airplane and how, pi is going to come in measured units and all this other stuff is going on. It was just a celebration of look at what we have learned and look at what life is going to be like in 1960.
Yeah.
We'll live in the world. Now, they did not take into account an awful lot. In 1939, there was an exhibition for the nation of Poland. The country of Poland paid money and said, hey, we're going to build an exhibition hall about Poland, talking about how great Poland is. That was in 1939. Well, the fair continued into 1940, but there was no more Poland Hall because there was no more Poland.
Wow.
Because the Nazis had overrun it. And just for the sake of things, the statue of the King of Poland that was in that exhibition is now in Central Park, just off from. So if you were walking in Central Park, it's just across the park from the Delacorte Theater. If you
Fascinating.
Oh, and here's something else. You know, the big parachute ride that was part of the World's Fair. The structure for that is still out at Coney Island. It's that big odd tower.
Yes, I think. Sure. Yeah. Oh, that's what that is.
You can still see all these little things from.
You don't want to go to 1939 to then live through World War II. You just want to go for a day, it sounds like, because that guy in the story is just, you're just like, okay,
going to get a cup of coffee, going to ride the sidewalks.
And our time travel fantasy, I don't want to go back for a long time. But it's interesting, you're picking a place, you're going back to a place that's looking to the future. Yeah, are you interested in the future at all?
Well, okay.
Would you want to go into the future? Would you want to know what the hell's coming? Are you interested?
Let's go back. And I've said this many times. Let's go back to, I'm 67 years old. So let's go back to 1966. Okay. If you could say to me, by the time you're 60, there will be no more Soviet Union. We will have stopped going to the moon, but you can watch any movie that has ever existed on a device the size of your phone and also talk to anybody on the planet Earth. I would have said, wait, can we go back to that no Soviet Union thing? I understand that TV is going to get better and phones will be great. And I believe that robots can buy our cars and drive them and stuff like that. But wait, can we go back to that Russia thing again?
Well, but that is, in a weird way, one of the most mind-blowing things. You're right. That kind of cultural shift, like that's really hard to get your head around. I mean, if I went into the past, I think I'd want to go, I don't know. I think I would want to go look at ancient Rome. I don't need to interact with anybody. I'll try to keep my distance.
You think you can walk around ancient Rome and keep to yourself and just see it long enough?
And my Doc Ellis t-shirt.
Doc Ellis.
My Doc Ellis t-shirt. I would have to go into the past just because I'm too interested to want to. It's like I gotta sort of see. I think I'd be very interested to go really far back and maybe see some of the prehistoric stuff and see some of that stuff where I'm definitely going to get killed in 5 seconds by a gigantic hornet or something.
Well, maybe not.
Or a Neanderthal's going to brain
maybe they
me.
don't view you as food, you know? Okay,
True,
Stephen, art has given us 2 versions of a version for each of them, going back in time and going forward in time. Let's go back in time first. Thornton Wilder's Our Town.
Oh, yeah.
Emily, who has died, wants to go back and live one single day of her life, right? And everybody who's dead says, don't do it. We all wanted to, don't do it. She says, no, I'm going to go back. And she went back and revisited her 8th birthday, right? And it was heartbreaking for her because she says nobody knew how special it was. Nobody knew how to take every moment as so precious it was. It ended up being a very, very bitter, sweet experience. Yeah. Okay. That's the past. So there's a reason not to go in the past. Let's come up with a reason not to go into the future. Charlton Heston on the beach in Malibu.
Damn dirty apes.
They blew it up. They blew it up. You know, there's a statue of them. Down there. Blew it up.
Part of H.G. Wells' Time Machine, which people forget about because he's finished fighting the Morlocks or whatever, and he accidentally hits the thing, and he shoots millions of years into the future.
Mistake. That's right.
Oh yeah.
And he's in the same place because you don't move in space, you just move in time. And he's like suddenly on a beach and there's just these like writhing crab creatures. And I sort of would like to see the time after humans. Like, what's it going to be like when we're all gone or we're something else? We're a different species.
Or we're something else.
Yeah.
That's what I think I want to believe that we're going to have wings and shit like that or
Giant
something. Or we're
heads
going to be
and
like, so that I want giant heads.
So I say
gigantic
do
heads
this.
and super
I say
long
do
fingers
this.
and stuff.
Let's send an iPhone on panorama setting on the camera.
Okay.
Put
get
that
it
up
back.
there and then get that back and we can see what
And
it's
bring that
like.
back.
Because who knows what's going to be in the air there? Who knows
That's
how
true.
toxic the atmosphere.
That's true. I'm just so curious. What the hell's, not even that far.
Yeah. See your children's accomplishments and stuff would be cool.
Yeah, that's curious to me. You know what I mean? It's like, that would be really interesting to me. You don't want to know.
I got news for you. My fortune is the last thing I want to know.
Yeah, that's a good.
Yeah,
point.
I think that Star Trek Deep Space Nine show had a great kind of very basic time travel thing in which, do you remember that show? Remember that one where they were
I
on
remember
the
that
space
show.
station?
I didn't watch Deep Space Nine. I only remember the originals.
I didn't watch it a whole lot, but I remember watching one episode where it's a real basic thing, but the guy goes so far into the future that his son is much older than him, and he has to see his son as an old man, and it's intense. That kind of thing.
I like to be in the writer's room of any show when they start bringing up, let's do a time travel episode. And the next thing you know, everybody's trying to figure out the rules of time travel. And, oh my God.
Yeah.
Your story like made me think of this crazy thought experiment because the guy goes back and he's married to a woman now and he's attracted to this woman in 1939 and he keeps going back to see her and like they hang out and he's infatuated with her. And I was thinking, if I was married now and I went back to Rome, let's say, and then I met some woman and had like a 50-year romance with, Octavia or something. And then and she passes away and it's this beautiful thing. And then I come back. I come back to Janet or whoever I'm married to now. I've only been gone like the one day. Have I cheated on her? You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, you have.
Yes. Yes. The
right.
answer to that
hear
is
me
simple.
out.
It's yes. No. I think that's a clear-cut answer.
Yes, you have.
Yes, you have.
And you better bring it up as soon as you get back from Rome. You better just say it right off the bat.
Should I
just
confess
cop to
it
it
right away? Okay.
Yeah, just cop to
Sorry.
it immediately. Do you, Tom Hanks, do you believe in the idea that there was a better time? Do you think
No.
1939 was a better time? Do you think anything was actually a golden age or anything like that? Do you buy that notion?
I do not.
Yeah.
I am a presentist. Does that make sense?
Aha.
Yeah.
That there
No,
is
what does that
only
mean? No, that's cool.
there is only the present because everything else, and I don't want to overuse this, but I read history for pleasure.
Yeah.
And because nothing is more fascinating than kind of like what people really did. And
Yeah.
a guy who grew up essentially in the Soviet Union, it was the first time I came across this concept of cognitive dissonance, in which everybody operated on these agreed upon rules of the Soviet Union. But everybody, and by I mean everybody, also knew that they were unworkable and everybody cheated,
Right.
You were supposed to, the promise was everybody would work to their best advantage and only take what they needed. But that translated as human nature to everybody worked as little as possible and took everything they could grab. That's just the way. So I look at any period of history that I read it as being that half and half. For everything about it that is extraordinary and wise, there still remains this. It's 50-50, man. It still remains. There was just as much ignorance, the power of idiocy, tyrants. I mean, you can talk about how great it would be to be let's go back and let's live on a farm in Ohio. All right, let's do that. That sounds like a pretty pastoral place to live. You know how many Native Americans you probably had to kill in order to have that farm? And how many trees you had to cut down and completely alter for 6 of one, there's always half a dozen of the other. So I don't think any time has been more malleable than the one that we're sitting in right now.
That's true. Do you think human nature has changed significantly?
Yeah, that's interesting.
I always find this an interesting thing. People go like, "Hey, we're just like us. Those ancient Egyptians were just like us," and I'm like, yes, to some extent, but no, too. I'm like, look at their art and look at what they did, and they clearly couldn't be seeing the world the way we did. They couldn't. The mind must have been different. Human nature has to have changed too. No,
look, there's been enlightenment with no doubt. I mean, human nature has changed because an awful lot of questions that we have asked about our world has been answered. I mean, we used to believe in a god of the Nile, and there used to be Apollo dragged the sun across the sky, and Artemis dragged the moon. We have become smarter, wiser. We've answered a ton of questions. But at the end of the day, do we still like the guy who lives across the street from us because he still has that stupid boat up on?
We do not like him.
Can you not? And also, he's always screaming at the kids to stay off his. Let the kids play in the front yard for crying. You
think that guy? You think that guy was back in ancient Rome? Get off my lawn!
Same exact dude.
Same guy. Get off the forum. Yeah.
There is always going to be someone who walks into the room and says, "Hey, I'm in charge here."
Yes.
Yeah.
And there's going to be somebody who says, okay, great. I'm glad you're in charge. And there's going to be somebody else who says,
that's great.
Who put you in charge?
No.
Yes.
How come you're in charge? Right. Isn't that, human nature in a nutshell?
Yes.
I mean, kind of like that.
It is.
I was in, I went to Egypt, which was amazing, life altering. And we were shown around the Great Pyramids and the Sphinx.
Yeah.
Okay. I've never been. And look, I just saw the movies, I saw Charlton Heston movies,
sure,
and,
Boris Karloff,
all that kind of stuff. That's all it is.
Boris
I saw
Karloff,
the Mummy.
right,
That's what I saw. I saw those. So I'm essentially operating on that speed of understanding. I know the very old, and it's hilarious because when you go see, like, for example, the Sphinx and the Great Pyramids, by the way, that are right there. You can see them from your hotel.
They're right there, right?
Yeah.
They're like right outside the city.
There's a Pizza Hut. Literally, and you can look at the Sphinx, and you turn around and look at the parking lot, and there's a Pizza Hut right across the street from the Great Sphinx. So we're there, and it's everything that it's supposed to be. But the fellow who is showing us around is an American, and he's an archaeological engineer, right? And he went the first time that he went there. He was a younger man. And he was a proponent or advocate, or he essentially studied the works of Edgar Cayce and mind dynamics. And it was all about the cosmic power of these mysterious structures and what do they mean and what creatures built them and what power. So that's why he went there with a bunch of those types who are going to go there and celebrate, we're going to go to the birth of this great cosmic force that is the pyramids and the Sphinx. Because you could have been in 1500 BC in Egypt and have had no idea who built those things. Yeah. We do not know who built them.
They were already ancient.
Right.
Yeah.
So this guy goes as an archaeological engineer. And he spent about 7 minutes in the throes of the great cosmic force that was there. And in the 8th minute, he told himself, I see how they built these things.
Oh, really?
The stones are very specifically placed, And so right then and there, I viewed that as like, because if you can't figure out how it got there, you're going to probably swallow anything that my this god or this king commended me in order to do it. But the fact is, people worked really hard and put it up.
Yes.
And you take
the actual achievement. Yeah, the actual achievement itself is miraculous.
And not to keep coming back to my Paul Giamatti reference library here, but what happened? What happened in Philadelphia and in other places as well.
Yes.
And in fact, Harari makes this point between the Code of Hammurabi in 1776 BC and the Declaration of Independence in 1776 AD, and just says, look, this is thought. This is work.
It's the same thing.
Hammurabi just said this is what it's going to be. But you guys, you and John Hancock and all those cuckoo all those nutty kids, argued and stuff like that.
They actually implemented.
But what went into it? What went into it was a lot of thought, a lot of arguing, a lot of compromise, a lot of I give up, just keep it as it is, and change a couple words and I'll be happy. And it ends up being so. What was the most malleable moment? When Hammurabi, put down his code, or that day in 1776, or the day before yesterday?
It's interesting that what people forget about that moment is that the idea of independence from a monarchy like that was not. It was invented somewhat in that form of independence. There had been earlier forms of it, but they'd all led to a new invention. It wasn't a sort of foregone conclusion.
Well, here in America,
too,
a guy came in and said, "Hey, I'm the king of all you guys," and somebody in America said, "Oh, yes, you are. Thank you for being our king." And then a bunch of other guys said, "Well, who made you king?
Who made you king?"
I don't think so, sir.
I would argue that the Harari thing is sort of the Enlightenment project. And you see this in books like by Steven Pinker, and I get that. But I would argue that the mindset of the Code of Hammurabi, which is, hey, an eye for an eye, is still in me. It's still in you. It's still in all of us. It's like we've progressed and we have like the state and we have laws and justice, but in there is Tony Soprano, who wants, justice for his daughter, now, and he's not going to wait for the state to do it. And it's like both these are riding in our heads, as we go forward. It's weird.
So, Stephen, I'm asking you, has human nature changed since those days?
I'm with you on that.
But that's more kind of basic animal behavior in some ways, eye for an eye and sort of like territorialism.
I think it's human too.
No, you think that's more human?
Well, yeah, attachment to your kids and what you do for them. It's animal and human, I think. It's rude.
The animals have put real nice spins on
we
savagery.
Are animals, yeah.
Now, Tom Hanks, you played an astronaut, and
yes, I did.
You know all about space and stuff like that. Are you a guy who buys into UAPs and UFOs? I'm just interested to know what you think of that. But I'm interested. Are you a skeptical guy, first of all?
Okay, yeah. I'm willing to give anybody a certain amount of credence up to somewhere on my test of authenticity versus what's the word, probability. I read there was recent, and maybe you might know something about this. Supposedly there's something about a very specific parallel, one of the lines of longitude across America, that for some reason this particular parallel has an awful lot of UFO reportings on either side of it.
There's all kinds of stuff like that. Sure.
Okay. All right. So I picked up a guy's book about that because I said, well, great. Let me read about that. And I'm going to say that there was so little recorded data. It was all a guy saw this and someone heard this and someone read this, blah, blah, blah. So there's, no, I saw it. No, it was read. There's photographs that show it. And there's an official report about it. Then I say, and where is, it's a blah, blah. But out of all of this stuff, I'm going to argue with somebody who was flying in an airplane and a jet at a supersonic speed and saw something that they couldn't explain. I think that I'm going to say this. 99.9% of this is, look, it was a weather balloon. Like I remember them when HBO first started off, they would all have these movies about, Roswell or, and here's a thing, and it was a cover up. And I remember reading this thing, a guy found a piece of material that you could crumple it up.
That's at Roswell, yes,
and
absolutely.
then you would put it down on a table, and it would unfold and be. And you know what? I was able to do the same exact thing with a hot pad and a sponge. I took a sponge and I crumpled it up and I put it down, and it was
I'd say he's a skeptic.
Perfect rectangle that it was. All right. Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
So
you're generally skeptical.
I'm not. I'm saying, dude, there's mysteries out there, Jack. There are super duper mysteries. But you remember the face on Mars? That was a big thing. Remember, there was a without a doubt. Hey, that's a face on Mars.
Yeah, in the 70s.
That is a face on Mars. Yeah. There it is. eyes,
Yes.
nose, a bit of kind of look like Wilson the volleyball, kind of look like that.
Yes, it did look like Wilson the volleyball.
It did look a little bit like
that.
that.
It did. Yes, it
And
did.
then about 3 years later, they did a Passover, took a picture again, and it was just this mishmash of something got blown away like a sandcastle.
I know you're friends with Obama, and I'm just sort of picturing him taking you aside, like, Tom, we really do have the craft in a hangar. We
need you to,
we're not. Yeah. You ever got that kind of?
No, I never got that level of honesty out of the man.
Yeah, right. It's. I don't. Yeah. I mean, I certainly. Yes, I'm with you in that. It's like, and definitely there seems to be something even weirder going on because you do suddenly have Pentagon. I mean, not just guys who've left the Pentagon, but you have people saying strange
Military
things.
guys,
About,
yeah.
well, yes, maybe. Yeah, I mean, fairly legitimate people saying strange things. I have a hard time going to the place if there's an alien cadaver in Nevada and stuff like that. I mean, and the guy recently who talks about he went in one of these ships and it was defied all known laws of physics. It was bigger inside than it was outside.
Well, could they land at
like
Pico and Westwood for crying out loud? Can they set down, in Midtown Manhattan and let us know that they're there?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's part of like the human psyche to see things in the sky because we've been doing it since the Bible, and to also sort of have this longing for like, well, maybe there's intelligence out there, and there's this kind of human longing. Yeah. Well,
it's the world's greatest game of operator. You're in a coffee shop in Ames, Iowa, or Dalhart, Texas, and someone comes and yeah. I saw a meteor last night. Did you see it? I was out and I was just walking the dog, and I saw a streak across the sky. It looked
Why the
like
Southern
a
accent?
I don't know because. And
then somebody, I'm buying
then
it.
somebody else
Tom
says,
Hanks doing it. I'm buying it 100%.
Lisa Ammerman came in the other day and she saw a streak across the sky. And you know what? I heard that thing landed just a little outside of Moline. And then someone else comes in. I heard from Rachel that Lisa told her that a streak landed across the sky and something landed in Moline. And dang, if it was about the size of a Volkswagen bus and had doors on the side, it just, spins right along.
Well, it's collective. Yeah, the collective delusion begins to really gain a lot of momentum when everybody starts participating in something.
I'm going to tell you right now, Paul Giamatti, there are people out there. There are people out there that served you a dish of your favorite ice cream somewhere. And they have turned that brief interaction with you into something much greater than it.
No, you're absolutely right.
Paul Giamatti came in for a cup of Rocky Road, and he was really pissed off about something.
Yeah.
And you weren't. You were just,
absolutely right. No, that's an excellent
good analogy.
In which case, I'll come back to you again, Stephen Asma. Has human behavior changed over the course of the millennium?
But that's that thing that Steve and I are fascinated by, though, is that's imagination, too. And it's like your imagination begins to just endlessly...
that goes back again to the cognitive revolution, because... Yeah. There was one way of looking at lions at the water hole, right? We went down to the water hole and there were lions at the water hole. So we turned around and came back.
Yeah.
Then there's somebody who has the imagination to say, last time we went down to the water hole, there were lions. Maybe we shouldn't go today, right? But the next step in cognitive, in that cognition is, I sense that there are lions at the water. You might not doubt any of those people, right? And
that's
from there, you get into someone that's going to say, we better not go because Christy says there are lions at the water hole. And somebody else says, how does she know?
Thank God Christy's here. But that's that thing. That's an interesting thing you're always talking about, Steve, which is that imagination is a function originally as this kind of like warning system, as a kind of like it's assessing sort of danger and assessing your environment. And
the lion at the water hole, the crocodiles. I mean, the first imaginative works we have, like the book, basically the Epic of Gilgamesh. You look at the Sphinx, they're these hybridized creatures that really represent real threats or predators in the environment, but they've been, like amplified into these narrative structures, like so that kids will stay away from the woods or stay away from the watering hole.
Right.
So like monster movies, all that stuff is like an expression of a sort of adaptive imagination.
Now, here's something that is undeniable, because it's happened to me and I bet it's happened to you. Have you guys ever had that moment where you're in motion and you sense something and hesitate, just stop? And it's a good thing you did, because there was a big chunk of barbed wire that messed up right there. That's happened to me. That's happened to me in an automobile while I was leaving the set of something, and my it was late at night. We were, one of those night shoots. It's too cold. It goes on too long.
Yes,
and I had to work
exactly.
every damn shot until we were wrapped. And I'm leaving, and I couldn't get the fog off my windshield, and I just was like coming out of the parking lot, and I just slowed, and then I stopped.
Yeah.
And when I did it, if I had not stopped, I would have run into the back of a flatbed truck right on the corner.
Yeah, how do you explain that?
I do not have an explanation of that other than we got some sort of magic for it. And I bet you anybody listening to this says, I did that. I walked into a room and I knew somebody was there or something like that.
Totally. Well, yes, I knew somebody was, yes. Well, that sense of like someone's in the house. It's someone's broken into that. But I mean, isn't that the same function if you meet someone and you're like, ooh, this guy, I don't know about this guy. You know what I mean though? And then turns out you were right. You know what I mean? Like you meet somebody and everybody loves this guy. He's the best. We love this guy. And you're like, I have this all the time. And I'm like, I don't know about this guy. And then it turns out I wasn't wrong.
If I was describing the day and a half I spent on the set of Johnny.
Everybody likes this guy, Tom Hanks. I don't get it.
Right. God, this Hanks guy. Yeah.
Well, you have been very generous with your time, Tom.
You have been
very
more than generous.
Really.
You've been here for a really long time.
Guys, honestly, outside of cheeseburgers and a cup of coffee, I can't imagine a better way to spend it now.
Very kind.
Oh, well, very good. This is a real pleasure. Thank you so much, man, for doing this and taking the time.
Thanks for having me. Let's do it again in a year or so.
Awesome.
We'll have stuff to talk about.
We'd love to.
You know why we'll have stuff to talk about, Stephen? Because human nature never changes.
There you go. You were right.
Love it. Fantastic, sir. Thank you very much, Tom
Thank you,
Hanks.
guys. Great talking to you.
Chinwag is a production of Treefort Media and Touchy Feely Films, hosted and executive produced by Paul Giamatti and Stephen Asma. Executive producers for Treefort are Kelly Garner and Lisa Ammerman. Dan Carey is executive producer for Touchy Feely. Our series producer is Rachel Whitley Bernstein, with additional producing by Mary Chulenza. Original theme music by Luke Top, with additional music by Via Mardot. Oscar Guido is our executive in charge of production. Tom Monahan is head of audio for Treefort. Our associate producer is Aidan Brooks. Audio production supervision by Jared Brom and Matt Dyson. Editing and mixing by Matt Dyson. Lastly, for more information, go to chinwagpod.fm and find us on Instagram or TikTok at chinwagpod or on Twitter at chinwag_pod.